Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of our My Hero Academia review podcast. If you didn't know, each and every week the two of us read through 2 volumes of the My Hero Academia manga, then sit down on this channel and review it. I am your host Hoodie, that is my co-host Zero, and this is Training Arc. If you're watching this as it goes up live on YouTube, then consider heading on over to patreon.com/K2YT and pledging a couple bucks to get the next episode early. Of course, every episode we like to throw a question out there for you all to discuss. Last week we asked you what are some quote-unquote necessary shonen tropes, and we will be reading our favorite comments later on in the show, so stay tuned for that. This week, we read through volumes 5 and 6, which are the end, just hit my microphone, the end of the tournament arc, and then the beginning of the Stain arc. So because we're in between two different serious arcs of sorts, it's a little harder to pick a thematically related question. We don't necessarily want to stick to tournament arcs, but we don't necessarily want to jump on the Stain arc just yet. So this question of the week, a little bit silly. Whose quirk would make the best basketball player? We'll give you our answers at the end of the video. Let us know yours in the comment section below. But enough of that. Zero, hit us with a brief summary of, let's just do the remaining tournament arc now. We'll discuss that, then we'll move on to Stain. So here's a brief summary of the remaining tournament arc.
These volumes really have it all. I mean, it starts off with the Bakugo Ochaku fight, which we all know Hoodie loves. Then we get Deku versus Todoroki, another great emotional fight. Then Bakugo versus Kirishima.
Super emotional. That one really got me.
Yeah. I cried during that one. Yeah. It was just so manly, Kirishima was proud of that one, even though he lost. Then Bakugo versus Tokoyami.
That's true. I forgot about that.
Good example of quirk exploitation.
Yeah, and another hold on. Another example of that fight that fight provides is Bakugo, being intelligent. Much like Deku, it's not highlighted, but much like Deku, where he sort of observes his opponents and counteracts, specific strategies, Bakugo clearly observed his opponent, Tokoyami, whatever his name is, and, not made adjustments, but realized the quirk and the quirk's weaknesses, which no one else in the show knew except Bakugo, except Deku and, Sugar Boy and, Ochako and stuff. So good on Bakugo for that one.
Yeah, Bakugo, like Deku, is very good at analyzing other people's quirks and finding ways to fight against them.
Which brings us to his big fight versus Todoroki. A little bit of, I'm not going to say letdown, but in terms of, the big climactic fights, it is obviously dwarfed by not only Deku versus Todoroki, which was the huge climax of, the tournament arc, but even a little bit, in my opinion, to the Bakugo versus Ochako fight. Not that this is a fault of the show in any way or a fault of the story, because, they knew perfectly well what they were doing, but the emotional heights of the Bakugo versus Ochako fight, obviously a lot higher than the Bakugo versus Todoroki fight, and the pure spectacle, not to mention emotional drama, was higher in Deku versus Todoroki. So what are your thoughts on the fights that we got at this last half of the tournament arc?
Honestly, the Bakugo versus Todoroki fight was one of my favorites in the tournament. I don't think he gave it enough credit, because one of the cool things about the sports festival is that everyone feels like they lost. Deku and Todoroki were beaten trying to win on their own terms. Bakugo, he won, but he couldn't accomplish what Deku could because he couldn't make Todoroki use his flames. And Ochako's strategy that she put herself on the line trying to perform got blown away by Bakugo.
And Ida's brother died. His brother's dead.
Ida's brother died. That's the ultimate L. No, he's alive. He just died as a hero.
Yeah, he's crippled forever. Might as well just be dead. That's a joke. I don't mean that. Anyways, I would agree that it's a good fight, and I have nothing against the fight itself, but it just very clearly suffers from being the third act to the climax that was Deku versus Todoroki, and it is purely, if I were to give it one thing, if I take away its credit as a fight, which I think I will do, I will then give it the credit of being a great step forward for Todoroki's character arc. So like Bakugo handling that loss is, whatever, that's fine. But the way Todoroki now proceeds, having used his left side versus, or whatever the fire side is, versus Deku, I think that is I don't know if I'd necessarily call it unique, just because off the top of my head, I can't really think of many great examples to counter this, but it is an interesting step forward in his character arc, in the sense that, like, it is not just Deku said something, so now I'm changed, now I'm just a brand new person. It is like, he even has the line where it's like, I forget the specifics, but he was talking to his dad or something, or someone, and he basically...
Like, I forgot all about you.
No, I'm thinking the line where he says, it wouldn't just change because I talked to this one guy. It's not just because I had this heart-to-heart with Deku. Yeah, it, like, really brought out my emotions in that instance, but now I need to, like, collect my thoughts and really think about it. And, this... Going into volume 6, we see that he is using his fire, but there was like a brief couple of chapters in between that, most notably the Bakugo fight, where he was like, I'm just not quite sure yet. I need to do some introspection, which is, after this he goes and meets his mom and all that. So if I'm going to, I will take away credit for the fight itself. In pure isolation, I think the fight it's okay. It has some interesting techniques from Bakugo. As pure spectacle, it is purely satisfactory. And then on Baku's end, it's perfectly fine as a character. But on Todoroki's end, I will give it that I think that is a great showcase of character development. Now, here's probably my most controversial point. I don't think it's going to be that controversial that, that fight was whatever, in my opinion. The real controversial point I'm going to say is that I didn't really like any of the other... okay, I shouldn't say I didn't like them. But overall, I would say I was disappointed. Because, I'm talking about Bakugo versus Ochako. I'm talking about Deku versus Todoroki. When I watched those in the anime, those really were emotionally impactful. So much so that, like, I felt compelled to write about Bakugo versus Ochako in my How to Write Fight Scenes video. And then I read the manga here, and I'm expecting to be able to have my emotions pulled in a similar aspect. And when I read it, it just didn't happen, And I don't know if it's just misunderstand, or I don't know if it's a pacing issue. I would probably say it's a pacing issue. The other obvious factor is that, like, I do find the action scenes a little bit harder to understand. But and I'd say that was actually probably a bigger issue for the Deku versus Todoroki fight. The Bakugo versus Ochako was still relatively straightforward, mostly, with a little bit of an exception that we can get into later. But I would probably put it more towards pacing, where it just felt like I was not able to give myself the appropriate time to really absorb all of the emotion that could go into those scenes. That's where when I watched it in the anime, and to really give the anime its credit, when I was making the thumbnail for this video, I had to go back into the Deku versus Todoroki fight to grab a screenshot. In that brief 20 seconds where I was watching just to get a screenshot, I was already like, damn, it really be like this, huh? I start tearing up, So in that aspect, I do find that these fights in the manga just tended to disappoint me and, like, underwhelm me a little bit. How do you feel about that?
I agree that, as is usually the case, the anime has higher highs emotionally, and it can deliver on these climactic moments very effectively. However, I'll say that when I get to these moments in the manga, I tend to, like, go back and reread certain key pages or panels. I don't know. You said it may have been, like, a pacing issue. Maybe it's because we read differently, we get different levels of enjoyment out of it. Or maybe, I'm just...
a superior human?
Yeah, maybe.
Perhaps. Very similar point. Obviously, this is recorded after the Best Guy Ever video. He just made the why manga is better than anime. And he talks about how anime can hit emotional highs a lot higher. We both saw that, and I agree with it. And one of the things he says is that despite that, manga still, in general, is better than their anime adaptations. And while I think that's true, we have to ask ourselves why that is. If anime has the higher potential, and it can hit emotional notes a lot higher than manga can. Why would it still be inferior? And I think it all comes down to messing up source material, which is like, if the anime just flat out does not respect its source material or changes things in a way that doesn't quite benefit it or whatever, then clearly, even though the manga does not have the highest ceiling, it still is going to remain at a higher quality level. But with this My Hero Academia, with My Hero Academia as a whole, but more specifically in these fights, I don't feel like at any point it was like, the anime fucked up in any way. The anime nailed this. I thought it was all done really well. So in that sense, I don't really see how I could have come out of the manga even enjoying these more. So I don't know. Maybe it was just kind of doomed from the start of being disappointed, and I guess that's kind of a shitty result of doing anime and then manga as opposed to doing manga then anime. Because if I did manga first, then it would be like, yeah, the manga fight was great.
Is so great.
Yeah, the manga fight was great, but then I watched the anime and I'm overwhelmed with how good it was. As to where now I'm in the way I do it is the anime bar was set and then manga just was a huge disappointment in result. So I guess I don't know. Maybe this is just a faulted premise from the get-go. We're kind of just biding time.
You did the wrong order.
Oh, well. Well, fuck me, I guess. A little bit of a revelation, just to keep in line with my training arc. A little bit of revelation I had when reading the Bakugo versus Ochako fight. And this is just purely speculation. I don't know if this is actually true or like why this happens. But I said that for the most part, I was able to follow along the action in that fight. That's true. There was one moment where I couldn't quite figure it out. And I knew what it was because I have seen the fight in the anime, but just based off of the page and the artwork alone, I couldn't quite piece it together. And it was the scene where she throws her jacket, like, to the left, and then puffs out of the smoke to the right to, like, try to sneak up on Bakugo and land a hit. In the anime, that plays perfectly fine. In the manga, I couldn't quite... You just see the shirt... And it's like, I can't quite piece together what's happening. I don't even really notice whether or not she's in the shirts until afterwards, when Present Mike basically says, oh, she just threw her shirt and then snuck up on behind him. Now, in the manga, that is a respectable thing to do because I needed someone to explain to me what just happened. However, in the anime... where that is already very apparent, just by the nature of animation, I could see the whole thing play out. We still get the Present Mike dialogue, which now plays like okay, I get it. So my revelation that I'm sort of having is, you look towards something like Haikyuu, which is probably one of the biggest criticisms that it gets, is that it's bogged down by how much explanation goes into all of these plays. How many times we go to Coach Ukai and the other dude, and they're like, oh my god, was that a blank, blank, blank? And then he's like, can you explain this thing to me? And it's like, dude, I fucking get it. I don't need you to explain all this. Is that maybe that is necessary in manga, and it's just no one's removing it for the anime for some reason. Do you think that's, like, valid at all?
I think that's an interesting example. Honestly, it's not something I really notice when, like, transferring from anime to manga. I guess this sort of, reveal happens a lot in manga, so I wouldn't be surprised if that is sort of the origin of this problem.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments if you have any insight onto that. But I think it's an interesting thing I noticed on. Any other thoughts on the fight just before we go into a general retrospection on the tournament arc in general?
I think we said it all.
Okay, so end of Volume 5, end of the tournament arc. What do you think? Pretty good? Fall flat compared to other ones? I don't have a ton of experience. You have a little bit more, so the only source of comparison I have for this tournament arc would be the tuning exams, and then of course the aforementioned Teen Titans episode. So my experience is a bit limited in terms of what this is able to provide. You have a little bit more experience. From my perspective, this was pretty good. I thought this started off really strong and then started to sort of slow down and become a little, let's get on with it towards the middling part, and then, it picks up towards the end with Deku and Todoroki and stuff. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think this is a pretty good tournament. I mean, I really love tournaments. The tuning exams is a pretty good one. I'm also thinking of the Dark Tournament in Yu Yu Hakusho. There was a tournament in the Hunter exam in Hunter x Hunter. I feel like there's been like a sort of gap in tournaments recently because there wasn't a tournament in Naruto Shippuden. There wasn't a tournament in Bleach at all.
Unless you watched the filler episode with actually there was a couple different filler. I think there was an OVA where Konohamaru does the tuning exams, and Naruto is in that tuning exam with him, but he gets disqualified because he goes Sage mode in the
This is bullshit.
And then there was also a filler arc where they go through how like all the other Leaf Ninja became tuning, so like Sakura and Choji and Neji and all them. Which
cool.
Which did have actually was not that bad. It had its moments of like, okay, this is filler and it's kind of getting annoying. But one of like the best taijutsu fights in the show came from that filler arc. It was Lee versus this completely filler character, and they just had a full on taijutsu. It was a bit silly in premise, but just execution wise, it was pretty interesting because like the filler character, he couldn't open his
technique similar to Eight Gates.
Yeah, have you seen it?
I think I've seen the fight on YouTube.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was from a tuning exam arc.
Yeah, it was. So there's a bit of a silly premise. It's like, oh, we can't give this guy the 8 gates, but let's just give him the 8 gates. But it still lands pretty well. I thought execution wise, that's pretty good. But that's for our Naruto training arc. This is the My Hero Academia one. And actually, to give it some credit, well, to level the playing field through discrediting Naruto, the actual tuning exams of Naruto isn't without the problems that I gave, My Hero Academia. If anything, I'd say it's even more there. Like, where I thought My Hero Academia started to slow down during, the cavalry battle, I didn't particularly love. I thought the obstacle race was kind of fun. The tuning exams has the whole fucking preliminary arc, which has moments that I kind of like Gaara versus Lee, but, Kiba versus Naruto, Sakura versus, so while I will discredit My Hero Academia for not being great, I don't think it's in bad company, is what I'll say.
I think My Hero Academia doesn't focus so much on the fights that matter less as the Naruto tuning exams did.
I mean, yeah, the manga most notably skipped Momo's fight entirely.
Wow, rude.
Two characters that we like or that we want to like. Just fuck it. Just don't even show that one. Just whatever. Who cares?
They get one panel each. It's kind of rough.
Any other interesting thoughts of comparison for this tournament arc?
I'll say I think it's a perfectly good tournament.
All right, that's fair. So all in all, pretty good. I still think, if I'm just comparing to the sort of magic I felt reading the first, or watching specifically, but also by extension kind of reading the first couple volumes, 1 and 2 specifically, I will say that, I've still failed, the show has failed to capture me in that way. And the tournament arc has fallen a bit flat in that sense, which is the past 3 volumes. So tournament arc aside, but or tournament arc comparisons aside, but just within this show isolated, I will say that, I really enjoyed the first 2 volumes, and these past 3 have had moments, but not quite have hit that same magical high that those first 2 gave me. What do you think about the volumes so far? Do you have a particular favorite?
A favorite of the volumes so far.
Or just you don't need to be volume specific. Just a favorite point within the manga that we've read thus far that for me it was 1 and 2 that really got me. Was were you a big fan of the tournament arc and that was it for you?
Honestly, I do sort of feel like the further we get in the manga, the more I'm like, okay, this volume is the best one,
So it's all the whatever comes new is the best to you, or not? That sounds like the meaning. What I just mean is it's continually getting better for you.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't necessarily agree. I don't disagree. Well, if I were to give it one thing that not one thing, but a couple things that it does continuously get better at is that the characters, which we will get into later as we go into the Stain arc, some of the characters, the side cast, has really been thoroughly developed in interesting ways. You know, it's particularly like Ida and Todoroki. We'll get into the specifics of that, you know, in a little bit, but I will give it that credit that, like, if you really attach yourself to those characters and really like them, then, you know, I could totally see a world in which the manga is continuously just getting better. But enough of that. Let's review some answers from last week's question of the week, which, again, if you didn't know, was what are some quote-unquote necessary shonen tropes? The first one is going to come from Twitter. If you're not following us there, I post a question of the week there too. This one comes from Janice Makadamaru. They say, I think the time skip trope is a necessary one on a story and franchise level. With a time skip, you can allow a change in looks, some new merch, and then you get training and giving a new moveset and status. It also prolongs the series, in which is great for an anime. I will say, I don't necessarily know if I would call it, I don't know if I would call it necessary. I do think the time skip is a very solid narrative tool, very interesting narrative tool to use. I don't necessarily agree with your reasons, which is that, like, new merch and stuff. I guess it's true, but I don't really care.
It's a good reason. It's all about the money, baby.
New moveset, status, all that makes sense. Because the thing about time skips that I find interesting is that, like, it's the only critically accepted form of unearned character development. You know, for example, if I had, like, one chapter and a character is acting in a specific way, if I just then went to chapter 2 and decided to 180 it would feel a little out of place, which is, you know, not as extreme as that, but that's kind of how I felt about Ida. However, if I said that there was a time difference between chapters 1 and 2 of, like, 5 years, now that 180 change it's no longer like, oh, this is shitty writing. Now it's like, whoa, I wonder it creates a sense of intrigue. You know, I wonder what happened in those past 5 years that could have changed it. And it's, you know, I think it is an interesting way of structuring your story to, you know, basically break up the monotony of a linear timeline.
It definitely does work that way, and another cool benefit is you get to, in shonen battle manga, get a big power boost and be way stronger and beat cool bad guys.
It's true. We saw that with Naruto Shippuden. He came out a big boy. And he also had,
for my training.
He had a new look, so he got some new merch in that one too. So yeah. All in all, pretty great. I don't know if I would call it necessary, but it is a pretty great tool, and I like how
it's a very common one.
I like the, you know, the uniqueness of that answer. You're the only one who said time skips. However, the other answer that we had a lot of people saying, I'm just going to pick one at random. We'll do Happy Lemon Lords. He said, I think Jump's 3 leitmotifs, tell me if I'm saying that wrong, are imperative. With leitmotifs, I mean effort, friendship, and victory. Jump stories are supposed to be optimistic and encouraging, with some notable exceptions, but you get my point. So I think that these 3 values should always be incorporated. Obviously, there has to be nuance to this. The leitmotifs have to be treated with care because they can also ruin the suspension of disbelief. If the next power-up is only one cheesy monologue about friendship away, the narrative loses any believability. Cough, fairy tale, cough. However, the 3 motifs have to be present to make a shonen. What draws so many readers in is the unwavering optimism of Deku or the familial love of the Straw Hats. And seeing someone we sympathize with succeed because he or she worked relentlessly is bound to be inspiring and cathartic. That was a bit more wordy than everyone else, but it presents the same idea basically, which is that, you know, friendship and the drive to improve, these are all things that are core to the shonen, you know, I guess aesthetic is the word we're all calling it nowadays. And I kind of want to, I don't disagree. Do you disagree at all, or?
No, they're all very ingrained in the aesthetic.
So I guess my question would be, why? You know, why are shonen defined by this thing, and why is that so important? And I guess a bit more of a pulled back question is, in comparison to Western media, why do you think anime in general, but shonen specifically in this case, focus on these abstract concepts, and that is like the real message of their medium, as opposed to where something like in the West, it might be a little more straightforward than that. So for example, you know, a very common trope in shonen would be the idea of genius versus hard work. And that's not exclusive to shonen by any means, or anime by any means. We could definitely have that shown, but it's a bit of an abstract sort of philosophy-based question, as where, I just watched a movie the other day called like Spotlight, and what makes Spotlight so great was that it was about abuse in church. It wasn't this sort of like abstract philosophical idea. It was just a sort of event that was happening, and there is depth to it for sure. It does play into these sort of abuse mentalities, but for the most part it was a lot more on the surface level. And do we think that's a bad thing, and why does that happen, do you think? I kind of dropped a heavy bomb on you without letting you know this is going to be asked beforehand, so if you need a second to think about it. Or do you think I'm completely off base? It is entirely possible that I am undercrediting Western media.
I do think, I feel like we were growing up, we were taught that every story has a moral and themes. I feel like that does sort of play true. I mean, like that Supernatural video I was talking about last week, it has a lot of the same themes described by Happy Lemon Lord, effort, friendship, victory.
That is, I mean, yeah, that's true. They are inherent to storytelling in a sense. But do you think like the focus is a little harder in anime as opposed to more Western stuff? I do, and I would say probably the biggest reason why, if I were to guess, and I haven't put a lot of thought into this. This is just sort of something I came up with this morning. If I were to guess why, it would be sort of the nature of anime and being animated opens the world up in such an extreme way that like we do not need to tether ourselves to any specific thing. And when you like remove all of these physicalities, you are basically just left with these philosophical concepts, So if the range of what is shonen can be a guy going to a cooking school and a world in which like there are ninjas and all of this crazy stuff and everything is different, at that point the one thing that could tie them all together would be these philosophical concepts. So when we specifically want to tie them all together, which we do by like creating a magazine like Weekly Shonen Jump, in which we want a core message or theme or identity, then all that's left is really to identify and focus heavily on these concepts, as to where that is a little less of a necessity with Western media, which may not be a bad thing, depending on the person. What do you think about that?
I think that's a sensible explanation. I also think it's possible that these authors are all trying their hands at a shonen manga, so like thematically they're approaching the same ideas, and in that process more focus gets put on those themes that tie these, as you described, very different stories together.
So it's kind of like oh, I shouldn't have even said that. Now I gotta try to figure out how to say this. It's like the Ouroboros. It's like the snake eating its own tail. Or you want to get a little more, maybe it's more like the human centipede, and it's like the first guy, he really had that concept, and then it sort of funnels through him, and a little shittier version comes out to the next guy, and then, so on and so forth.
Oh yeah, that's why the classics are the best.
Yeah, perhaps. The other comment I wanted to include, it wasn't necessarily about the question of the week, but I thought it was a great comment, and I just had to put it in. It's from Mathwiz. He says, "Dear God, no, don't spread that gigic bullshit. Hiroaka is absolutely a battle shonen. Fuck that character drama bullshit. Most shonen narratives have that character drama conveyed through fights. That's exactly what the fights are there to do. It's like how a sports anime will progress its narrative character arcs through a sports game. That's what the setting is for. Hiroaka isn't special in that regard, and this is coming from a huge Hiroaka fan. Gigic's video on the fights in Hiroaka is one of my least favorite videos on YouTube because it seems to throw all of the shonen stories under the bus just to make Hiroaka seem exceptional." So, not related to the question of the week, but I thought it was a great clapback. Yeah, fuck Gigic. I don't know. I didn't even watch the video, but I appreciate the raw anger, the hot take provided by Mathwiz there. If you have any hot takes yourself, leave them in the comment section below. All right, are we ready to just move on to the Stain arc?
Let's.
All right, hit us with that brief summary of the one volume of the Stain arc that we have.
So, our boys at UA, they get back from the sports festival. They learn that, hey, they get to pick their hero names. And everyone gets one except Bakugo. He literally doesn't even have a hero name in the manga now. Because of this moment.
Quick interjection. When I was reading the manga, the name he comes up with was like King Explosion Murder and then Lord Explosion Murder. And, those are funny in their own right. But
that little shit.
I read in the comment section underneath someone explaining like how like the actual Japanese like wording that's being used and how it's actually really, really clever. I forget what it was. It's like something that the words in Japanese are written like Baku Setsu, which is just it plays on his name and also plays on the way certain words sound. So as in English it's just a funny joke, but in Japanese it's actually really, really clever. So just wanted to give credit where credit is due. Good job, I guess, Horikoshi.
Yeah, Horikoshi loves name puns. He's always talking about them in the street outfit page.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I'm not a big pun guy, but I'll give credit where credit is due. I'm not a big, I hate puns. I hate puns because they are lazy. Like when someone just says, fucking basic, whatever. Then and this is really off topic, but
just talking about comedy now.
I do hate that. I also hate the idea that so many puns, like the defense of how easy puns will be like, oh, I hate when people don't laugh at my pun, and like I hate when people groan at when I make a pun. It's like, fuck you, this isn't comedy anymore. If you just you tell jokes to inspire people to not laugh, like what the fuck are you talking about? Anyways, but I will say that if a pun is really well thought of, really clever, I'll make a couple puns myself. In that instance, I can give someone the credit they deserve. So, Mr. My Hero Academia boy, good job.
Thank you, Horikoshi Sensei.
All right. So they pick their names. What else happens?
What'd you say?
I said they pick their names. What else happens?
Okay, so they're actually going to be interning at different hero agencies. We found out that Bakugo and Todoroki got thousands of what was it? Drafts?
Yeah, drafts. Deku got none, surprisingly.
Yeah, I guess they all realized he just broke his hand like multiple times.
He did get a couple hits in. He got a couple pretty good hits in without breaking anything. Mostly broke everything though. So
yeah, that was his strategy. It's got to change.
Still, you would think like at least one hero would be like, let me help this kid. He has such enormous potential. But no, they're all like fucking selfish assholes, and they're just like, give me Mr. Endeavor Boy. I want Endeavor Boy. This is why Stain was needed. Like. This is why Stain was needed, because fucking clearly we have some issues here. All right.
All right. Calm down, Kira supporter.
Okay. Go ahead. What else? What else do we get?
Well, we found out that Gran Torino actually drafted our boy Deku. He is the only one. And this had All Might quaking in his boots. He was so terrified of old Gran Torino. And honestly, in the manga, it has the gag. But, the scenes of Gran Torino in his younger form beating the crap out of Todoroki, or out of Toshinori, are honestly pretty brutal. He messes him up, man.
Do we see that in the anime?
Yeah.
We do? I don't remember that. Oh, well, I guess I'm just wrong then. So what else? What else happens?
They're all at the train station or whatever, parting ways. And Ida's all like, don't worry guys, I'm fine. And Deku's like, you haven't mentioned your brother dying.
Which happened, and he did die.
And then, he just, yeah, I'm fine, and walks away. It's a very
famous
sad
last
moment.
words.
If you walk away, you can't hear me say, please, oh baby, don't go.
Okay, thank you. So, go ahead and fast forward. Deku learns a new ability called Full Cowling. Cool. Good for him. What happens after that? Yeah.
I really like Deku's analytical mind being highlighted in this training arc of his, because Gran Torino points out that like he progressed a lot after one session of sparring in one night. He figured out, oh, this is what I'm doing wrong. I have to be more fluid.
All right, let's pause the summary for a second then to talk about this, because I did take some notes on it. One note, which is that I don't necessarily, I agree with the sentiment. I didn't feel like it was executed super well. One, I like Full Cowling. I like him learning to use it. I don't like, I enjoy the idea that we're moving away from him breaking his bones every time, that it's losing its charm pretty fast. So I like that we're improving. I like that when he was fighting Gran Torino, he was like, he's coming from my back, gonna turn around and hit him, and then Gran Torino adapts to that, predicting that. I liked all of that. I didn't like the sort of abstract, Gran Torino says, like a fucking riddle basically, and then Deku just immediately solves it and is like, I now understand my powers. It's just, I got it, it's fully done. And then one page later he is basically not mastered Full Cowling, but he could use it proficiently. So I do think in a sense I like the idea of a character who is smart and is able to think his problems through and is able to come up with unique solutions, not just in battle, but just in his training as well. This was to call back to Naruto again. I liked when he was training Rasen Shuriken, and we got the unique shadow clone training and all of that, and the chakra control and whatever. So I like this from Deku. I just thought it was a little fast and a little too abstract, whereas even when he is explaining it to me, I never really understood the egg in the microwave metaphor. And then now we're in a microwave metaphor, and it's like, I don't know what is happening anymore. I don't really understand. So
it's like, a microwavable pizza. You gotta make sure the plate spins so it gets heated evenly.
I don't even get it. I mean, I get I get the I shouldn't just use it in my fist. I should use it in my entire body. I understand that. I just think the way he came to understood it was a little weird. I don't know. It rubs me a little wrong. It rubs me in the sense of what was that?
You just don't know microwaves.
Yeah, my microwave game is a little weak. Okay, so Deku learns Full Cowling. That's basically all my notes on Deku. He goes, now we move into the real meat of the issue, the real meat of the volume. He goes to Hosu with Gran Torino, he's going to a different city, going through Hosu, only to be interrupted by a Nomu. A crazy Nomu. Now, of note, not as they say, not as strong as the one All Might fought, but they're a third as strong. There's 3 of them, or 5 of them, or whatever. And they are attacking Hosu. Gran Torino runs off. Deku goes with him. Now, we've already met Stain, but here's where Stain and Ida come to fight. And now here's what I gotta say. Ida somehow has finessed his way into being the most developed character in the show. Somehow he went from, chapter 2 is Horikoshi's I don't know, I just kind of came up with this character when the studio asked me to. I don't really know what he is, whatever. And now it's 20 chapters later, this is Shakespearean drama, he's screaming while
you killed my brother.
So, and you know what? It totally works. I think Ida, I gotta say, okay, skip ahead a little bit, Todoroki comes into, so let's talk about all 3 of them. Ida, Deku, Todoroki. Somehow, this has become the main 3 of this show. It was, it's not uncommon for a group of 3 or a small group of people to become the main characters of the story. However, when you watch a show, you think, okay, maybe it's Deku, Bakugo, Ochako. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe it's Deku, Bakugo, or Deku, Ochako, Ida. And it's like, well, hold on, maybe now somehow we've gotten to Ida, Deku, Todoroki. And it's like, this is completely different from what we started out with. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a really interesting thing that somehow these became the most developed characters.
Yeah.
Even kind of pulling away from Deku for a little bit, because to give so much room to Ida, Todoroki and Deku kind of like learned from each other and like they grew in parallel, but Ida basically has his own story at this point, and that has pulled away from Deku. So that is an interesting route to take the story, in my opinion, is to give so much spotlight to this, what was basically a one-note character.
I think it's an interesting development, like they sort of inspire Ida's development.
For sure. So of note, Ida, during the naming thing, just to go back for a second, he refuses to take Ingenium's name, despite Ingenium saying that, I hope I'm saying that name right, despite him saying like, hey, I can't be a hero anymore, please take my name, carry on the legacy. Ida says, I'm not quite ready yet. Fast forward a day, and he's like, I'm ready now. He says, I am Ingenium, and is ready to fight Stain. What do you think about that? Taking the name. Do you think, do you think that was really weird how fast he changed his mind? Or do you think there was like sort of the heat of the moment sort of inspired him?
I think it makes sense because, like Todoroki, had to face his mom before he could use his flames. Ida had to face Stain before he could call himself. I think it's Ingenium, but I like Ingenium more.
Me too. I don't particularly like either of them. I think it's a name that looks better written and not said.
Yeah.
But in that line of thought, which is perfectly reasonable, and I think you're probably on to the right idea. I wish the Stain fight with Ida lasted a little bit longer. Yeah, he kind of just got clapped instantly. Where we are right now, where this volume just ended, we are in the middle of the Stain fight. Todoroki basically just showed up, and they are now fighting, and it looks like they're about to go on the counterattack, basically. So we still have the rest of the fight to go through. But what we have so far, Ida has basically not done anything. He runs in, saves this random hero from being murdered, and then he himself gets trapped by Stain's power to like paralyze you if he gets your blood. And the rest of the fight, basically, Ida is just on the ground. So in that sense, I kind of wish Ida was able to put up a little bit more of a fight and really give Stain at least a small run for his money before he was like, I am Ingenium.
I think the fact that he was defeated so easily sort of highlighted for him that he was, doing everything wrong. So that in itself, so when you say doing everything wrong, like not taking his brother's name was also part of that? I'm referring more to, his thirst for revenge and allowing that to guide him towards, I don't know. Vengeance. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that though, because even after calling himself, actually maybe I'm wrong here. I think I need to look at the panels again. But even after like calling himself Ingenium, he is still telling, Todoroki and Deku to just run, to just leave him to fight him alone. So I don't necessarily know. I would need to double check to make sure. I think that's like, it could be a valid takeaway, what you're saying, but I don't know if that's necessarily with how that lined up. Other notable thing of this fight would be that Todoroki shows up and is using his left side. So where we left off at the end of the tournament arc, he says, he goes home, says, I got shit to do, to his sister, goes to the hospital to visit his mom. A very sweet little couple of panels that we saw of that, where she, you don't see her right away, and then when he flashes back to that meeting, you see her turn around. She seems like a very nice lady compared to what we saw of her last time, where she, burned his face off. Did the thing. And looked like a literal demon. So presumably that went well, that whole meeting. And it contextualized, what it means to be a hero for Todoroki, and how like being a hero is not being his dad, and how he could use his powers to do better, to be like All Might. And so he shows up to this fight to save Deku, save Ida, and he is fully blasting those flames. What do you think? You think this is
Well, I guess it's not a fair question to ask what you think in terms of his character arc. I was gonna say, do you think this is a permanent change for him? I guess you kind of know already. So, is it? Is it a permanent change? Is this like the beginning of Todoroki, full half and half?
Yes, and I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. It feels a little fast. Though, I get him using it here. Like, definitely use it when you're fighting Stain, but I don't know.
Well, I get what you're saying. Like, you're sort of implying that, the character arc might not have warranted it, but the dire situation of fighting Stain does. However, in the grand scheme of writing, like, to compromise ideals just for the sake of, the fight is important enough, kind of lends less credit to the character arc as a whole. So I would probably not want that. However, I agree with the sentiment that this is a little fast, especially because, if we didn't get the scene where Todoroki was like, I'm not going to change just because Deku said something, if we didn't get that scene, I would probably not care all that much. But because, the mangaka was like, hey, we are going to take our time with this character arc, to then basically the next chapter be like, yeah, it's fine, we're good. Then
one more day.
Yeah, in that instance, it does feel like, all right, well, you kind of fucking blue-balled me there. Any other thoughts about these characters, or I guess any other characters? We didn't get a lot of, Ochako or anything, but we did see that, she went with Gunhead and all of them. We saw a little bit of Endeavor, not a lot. We'll see a little bit more of him in the coming chapters, but any thoughts on the characters we've been shown thus far?
I think they're all great. They're all really impressing me. And I like that Stain sort of acknowledged Deku and Todoroki, like, okay, these guys, they'll be decent heroes when they're older. Especially after he, like, denounces Ida, like, look, man, you're not a hero. I'm gonna kill you.
We'll talk about this. Go ahead.
I feel like that it sort of, like, validates his opinion a little bit. Because Ida was like, how could you... you killed my brother. There could not possibly be a good reason to do something like that. So, you're a bad guy. And then... he's like, okay, he actually does have pretty good evaluations of a hero's values.
Yeah, I think Stain, and we're going to talk about this more as we, like, towards the next episode next week, but I think Stain was a really, really interesting and good choice on Horikoshi's part. Creating a character that had such strong ideals that resonated really, really well with, like, with the characters that we have, and is going to change things. The fact that Stain can come in and leave really fast and have such a strong rippling effect on all of the characters of the show, I think lends a lot of weight to this character. So, we've only just met him, and he's gonna say goodbye in the next couple chapters. But Stain, I tip my hat to you, my friend. Good character. All in all,
he is.
Thoughts on the last 2 volumes?
Great stuff. I really do love these 2 volumes.
Well, I hate to be the Debbie Downer then, but I'm not quite as convinced. I think the heavy aspects of the Stain, character are going to come through in the next volume, so I'm looking forward to that. But what we have now, I think we leaned pretty heavily on these past 2 volumes with action. With the ending to the tournament arc, and then coming up on Deku's training, and then also the beginning of the Stain fights. I think we've done a lot of just heavy action, and because that is such a weak point to me for, like, being able to comprehend the manga, I think these couple volumes ended up falling a bit flat to me in comparison to like volumes 1 and 2. So and to go back into Best Guy Ever's point, if anime, My Hero Academia has a good anime adaptation. So if the anime
it's true.
has the higher potential, I'm obviously, going to be in the realm of, like, yeah, even if this was good, the anime was better. So all in all, last 2 volumes, a little too heavy on action for my personal tastes. Pretty good introduction to a great character, though, and hopefully next volume we see a quick turnaround in terms of my own opinion, because I would be disappointed if those next 2 volumes don't really grab me. Any last thoughts on these 2 volumes?
No.
All right, then that leaves us with one thing left to do. Let's answer the question of the week, which again is, whose quirk would make the best basketball player? Now, there's a couple stipulations here we got to talk about. We discussed this beforehand. We're obviously only doing students, not just 1A, but just students. Now, my additional question should be, what is fair? You know, like, is Todoroki allowed to just freeze everyone and then fucking dunk on them? Or is that like, you're breaking the rules here, you know?
That would be a foul.
Okay. So, because here's my answer. And I looked at the classes, I thought long and hard about this. And by that, I mean, I took about 2 minutes. But I don't know if I'm pronouncing this guy's name right. Mizo Shoji. He has the duplicate arms. He teamed up with Mineta during the cavalry battle.
Yeah.
I picked him because I thought, you know, the specific aspects to his quirk are not just arms. It is just body parts. And we see this with him duplicating eyes and stuff. What this means is...
It's like Sasuke's curse mark, too.
Yeah, he has increased senses. You know, he has those... You know, the visibility in all angles. He is able to really but if he needs to, he also just has 6 arms that he could, you know, dribble between. And you know, you look at this guy and you could tell this guy's athletic as fuck. You know, he can handle his own. So when I see a guy on the basketball court, I think, you know, I would definitely be willing to pick this guy. Now, the one stipulation would be like, if we are in a world where like Deku can just fucking punch him and steal the ball, then all right, you know, fair enough. Fair enough. Right, I guess he loses.
Not quite how it goes. So, all right, we're playing NBA rules here.
Okay, what's your answer then?
There are a few characters we got to give props to. Obviously, Asui got mad dunks.
For sure.
I think Uraraka would definitely be able to like master the three pointer.
No, but yeah, that's true. But she would really need, fuck the 3-pointer. She could do full court shots. But
exactly,
that in itself, like, that's not innate to her power. It would just be. It would be as likely as someone being able to do it with just a lighter ball. You know, like a real person could do that if given a lighter ball. So the question is, like, while it is true that is a possibility, she would still need to train super hard to be able to do it.
Not really, because all she needs to do is just, like, toss it up, activate her powers, float it all across the court over to the hoop, and then...
Well, she can't control things mid-flight, can she?
Not really.
So she would still need to have good aim.
I guess that's true.
So that's what I'm talking about, basically. She would need to train to at least be, you know, hitting the net or hitting the backboard. So
yeah, she needs to get those angles.
I do think credit where credit is due. It might be good, but I think, you know, there's a lot of variables there. Who else you got?
I mean, we saw Kuroko no Basket. We know how good an invisible man is. Toru would be OP.
Okay. Okay, but the difference, if we're just taking this super serious, the difference is that Kuroko, he was able to, like, okay, maybe this isn't a fair point. I was gonna say that Kuroko was able to, like, use other people's attentions to, like, manipulate where he was, in a sense of, like, he would know where they wouldn't be looking to go there, right? That was, like, a big aspect of his power.
That's true.
As to where Toru is, like, you still can see the ball. So, if she is not, you know, on her game and is, like, really aware of where you are and where you're looking, then it's very easy to identify where she would be. So there's the hole in that one.
I think, you know, you're underestimating our girl Tora here.
Am I?
Toru.
Am I really?
I mean, she's alright. She avoided Todoroki's ice in the villain invasion.
More like he just didn't know she was... I guess, okay. Alright. But you didn't know she was there, but to be fair, she wasn't holding a basketball, so...
That's true. Okay. I guess the last honorable mention is Ida, because he would be the ultimate defender, because he's just tall and he's really fast.
Oh
so
yeah, he's covering the entire
catches
fucking...
a rebound.
He's in the entire
Zoom.
3-point zone. You know, he's
Yeah.
on both sides, constantly running back and forth. You're not getting any fucking.
Yeah, you're not getting a shot. Not in this house.
That's a good point. How's his jumping ability? I assume it's pretty good, right?
Probably. I don't know. He doesn't really focus on jumping.
He seems like a pretty tall guy. So, you know, for their standards, for like high school
I'm
standards.
sure he can jump as well as an athletic 14-year-old.
Because of how like bombastic and like fantastical these quirks are, it is a little hard to like, you know, choose some of these realistic ones. But if I were like in the realm of realism, I do think like Mizo, Shoji, and Ida would make like really good basketball players. Like these guys would be on the My Hero Academia basketball team if there was one in the UA school, you know?
That's true.
So
I feel like Alien Queen would be too, even though her quirk isn't really suited to it.
can I just say, I've been thinking a lot. When I was in elementary school, this is completely unrelated, but when I was in elementary school, I was on the basketball team in 5th grade, and we did terrible. There were a couple kids on the team who were pretty good, but by far, the best player in our entire elementary school was this girl named Devon, and she fucking killed it. Like, I'm not even talking like, oh, we all sucked and she was competent. No, like, I would be surprised, you know, granted, we were just in 5th grade at the time, but like, based off my memory of how good she was, I would be surprised if she doesn't grow up to be a professional athlete. Well, we're 20 now, so I guess I could just look her up on Facebook to see if that happened. But like, she definitely had the potential to like really fucking go far, you know. So, you know, as to where we lost in the first round of the tournament. So like all year you play scrimmages basically, and then at the end of the year you play one tournament. We lost immediately. It was really sad. I cried. But they won 2 games, I think, and then they lost. So, you know, and let me tell you, the rest of the girls' team fucking sucked. They were all terrible. It was basically just her straight up being Aomine, fucking killing the court 1v9. You know? So, you know, completely unrelated to My Hero Academia. But gotta give props. Gotta give props to Devon. Good job. All right. Any last stuff on the question of the week?
I guess let us know who you think would be the best basketball player. Try to avoid heavy spoilers.
Yeah, keep it students, and then within the realm of what we've read so far, what's been in the anime. Let us know your answer in the comment section below. We will pick our favorites to read in next week's. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Training Arc. If you're watching this on YouTube, head on over to patreon.com and consider pledging to get the next episode on Monday. Otherwise, we will see you in a week with the next 2 volumes of My Hero Academia.
Bye-bye.